How many variations have we gone through at this point, Rula?
1,000.
Hopefully, this will be the last one. Hello, listeners, and welcome to the Nerdy Photographer Podcast. In addition to providing you with informative and entertaining photography-related content, we, the Nerdy Photo Crew, also go on adventures with the Nerdy Photographer, who is currently, according to our best estimation, being flung randomly through parallel dimensions and alternate timelines. I am Fibonacci, a sentient spaceship, and I am also joined at the moment by Rula 3RDS, our composition robot.
Vroom, vroom.
There are other crew members around, but the more crew we have involved in any particular task, the more difficult the process is for some reason. Currently, we are testing a theory where we create the ideal conditions for the nerdy photographer to be returned to this particular timeline. Speaking of ideals, on this episode, Casey speaks with photographer Brittany Sidwell about creating your ideal client profile and why it can be so helpful to your business. They discuss questions you should ask when creating your ideal client profile and ways to connect with your ideal clients. All of that after the break. Okay, Rula, what else do we need for this ideal setup?
Tiger. Toilet.
Okay, let me see if we have those.
Hey photographers, have you noticed how the life goes out of your subject's eyes when you tell them how to pose? You say stand there, put your arm like this. It gets even worse when you have subjects who are a bit shy or introverted. If you want to create authentic, emotional photos, my Let's Be Real Unposed photography prompts will help you create interactions that your clients will remember when they look back on their photos for years. I've developed my Unposed photography prompts over 20 years, taking pictures of people using my own self-conscious nature to help my clients who felt that they were unphotogenic. From couple sessions to weddings and family portraits, these prompts will help you get more dynamic and natural photos with your subjects. And right now, you can get 25% off if you use the code POD25P. That's POD, P-O-D, 25P, all uppercase. Just go to nerdyphotographer.com and find the prompts in our store. Stop posing and start prompting. Hey there, listeners. Do you enjoy podcasts? Of course you do. You're listening to one. But who knows? Maybe you're listening to this podcast because you're being held hostage by an interdimensional being who only plays extremely niche content to their prisoners. But if you do like podcasts, you should check out the Good Pods app. Good Pods is an award-winning podcast app that is basically the social media for podcasts. You can see what podcasts your friends are listening to, directly recommend episodes to your friends, bookmark specific episodes to listen to later, and follow and chat with your favorite podcast hosts, as well as fans of shows you like. Another great aspect of Good Pods is that they have indie-only podcast charts. As an independent podcaster myself, I can't tell you how nice it is to see your podcast actually charting when you don't have to compete with giant podcast networks with big advertising budgets or who cross-promote on hundreds of different shows. So go download the Good Pods app, find and follow the Nerdy Photographer, and leave a rating on your favorite episodes. You don't have to leave a review. Just 5 stars will do the trick. Or if you're feeling especially generous, you can leave a little something in our tip jar over on Good Pods. That's right. We have a tip jar. I got a tip for you. Don't take any wooden nickels. And go download the Good Pods app. Hello, and welcome to the Nerdy Photographer Podcast. I am your host, Casey Fatchett, and I am here today with Brittany Sidwell. Brittany is a wedding photographer from Knoxville, Tennessee. We met on Clubhouse. Welcome, Brittany.
Hey, welcome. I'm so glad that I'm here. Thank you so much for having me, and I'm super excited.
I'm glad that you could make it on. Today, we're going to talk about ideal clients and why this is so important for photographers to think about their ideal clients. So, Brittany, what is an ideal client?
So let me tell you first what's not an ideal client. um, I we talk about ideal clients so much in this industry, and normally relate it to things that are like their budget or their venue or anything like that, and which is actually not the case at all. I believe that our ideal client is the type of person that we are drawn to and that make us the better artist or creator or whoever you are that you're able to be. But also just people that are aligned to your values and your ethics and what your vision is for how you want your business to work. And so, it for me, I think that my ideal client is like completely the coolest person ever, and it's all about the type of person that they are instead of like what they're able to provide for my business, if that makes sense. So I'm so excited to talk about this.
Oh,
This is one of like my favorite topics.
yeah, I love this. Is something I wanted to talk about on the podcast since I started. I just really hadn't found the opportunity to really get to it. And I think that it's, I think you're right. A lot of people think of it like in sort of in terms of like, I want somebody who, I remembered asking a photographer once who I was trying to help out, like, who's your ideal client? And she was like, yeah, it's somebody who's, does luxury DIY barn weddings and their budget for photography is $7,000. I'm like, that's not an ideal client. That's just that's sort of a wish list.
Yep.
And you really need to
Yes,
understand.
that's a good way of saying it.
Yeah, that's more of like your wish list of something you want to do, as opposed to who
Right.
your ideal client is. And you're exactly right. It's the person that you want to connect with, and who connects with your business and what you like. I think that it's really important for us to think of ideal clients in the sense of they're people who like sort of echo our own values, but also like they're somebody who's going to connect with not just the style of photos, but just the style of your personality and the way that you do business.
Well, and I think that it connects to like your ability to be able to identify what your business is. And so you're not really able to connect to that kind of person that you want to if you yourself are not thinking like, okay, this is just who I am and I'm comfortable with who I am in my business and this is my personality and this is reflecting into my work. And so I feel like once you kind of become more secure in that, then that ideal client is naturally attracted to it because you're being consistent, because it's just fluid language at that point. It's ingrained in who you are. And so it's reflected everywhere.
Yes, yeah, exactly. I think like there's a lot of photographers that don't necessarily understand, why they need to even think about their ideal client. Like they just sort
Hmm.
of think that, okay, I'm going to take my pictures and I'm going to be who I am. Why should I even? Why is this even important to me?
Right, right. Yeah, yeah, because it's think about the pain points as a photographer. If you're a photographer listening, I'm sure that you've had some of these pain points where you've had people that you're just like getting an inquiry and you're like, how did they even find me? Right. Or another thing, another way you're like on their wedding day and you're like, what? Like, why am I here? Like, this is not my person. Like, so, you don't even think that you can have the control over that at first. When you're a new photographer, you don't think, you just are told like, you just got to do everything. And if they pay you, like, that's really all that matters and they're valuing you. But really, when you're not connecting to your ideal client, they're really not valuing you.
Yeah.
They're hiring you because you're a photographer that has great work, which is great. And they may respect you, but they're not really fully valuing your artistry and like what you're able to bring to the table. Right. So
Exactly.
that's the necessity of it.
Yeah, and you think that like it's hard. Like I totally fell into that trap when I started out as a photographer. Like just take anything that comes my way. I gotta take. That person. No, there was no style to it. There was no, like there was no through line. And now, like it's what it's become. It's like I tend to, I connect with people who don't necessarily feel comfortable on camera, because I
Hmm.
don't always feel comfortable on camera. I feel self-conscious,
Hmm.
but I have put that energy out there and like I talk about the things that are important to people who feel self-conscious about themselves and feel self-conscious on camera. And those are the issues that I talk about. And so I have attracted those clients, and those are the people we get along. We understand one another. And those people are also more effusive in their praise. They're the ones who are going to recommend you to other people like them. And that's how
Right.
you keep that
Hmm.
wheel going. You create that machine of, referrals and reviews where people sort of like, oh, that you really connect with them on more of a level than just simply we want to check off this box of having a photographer.
Right. Yes, that is a beautiful point because I agree. I have not since this kind of wheel has been turning. It's so interesting because the inquiries that I get now from a referral base is, hey, you shot my friend Hannah's wedding, and she just said that like you were. It felt like having a best friend, like that she is. I started following you because of her, and I love your feed. I love what you talk about. And this is not patting myself on the back. This is just genuinely, I'm just showing up how I am, like 110% how I am. And so when people are then hiring me from a referral base, they already know who I am. They already know what I'm about. And so now we have like this incredible client experience because once we jump into a booking scenario, we already are familiar with our vibe and who we are and what's important to us. Like that's checked off, done. So now we get to talk about the awesome stuff that connects us even further into each other's lives. And we're both able to serve each other so much better. So yeah, I mean, even complete strangers, just that referral, um, yeah, you're already introduced basically, you know?
Yeah, and I think that those things, even for people who aren't referred to you by somebody else, like even when they come to you and they like get those sort of like you mentioned, like the pain points, it's the pain points for clients as well. Like as photographers, there are things that sort of automatically, sort of set us off and like make us sort of cringe when we think about them. But that's the same for our clients. And by addressing those problems and those issues, and like just like you said, it's just our style. If we
Yeah.
solidify that and think about it, and maybe put some thought into the space of like, how are we taking care of those people that are our ideal people that we match up with? What are the things that we do? And like, it's just innately something that I do, but I need to like, people don't always necessarily just pick up on it based on an Instagram caption. I need to talk about it.
Mhm.
And so that when those
Right.
people do see your stuff and when they see your social media feed or they go to your blog posts or wherever, and it's just like innately in your communication because you know to focus on it, then they like you
Mhm.
said, they automatically feel connected to you. They feel like there's already like there's they that you're one of their people. You're like they like one of us. Like
Yep.
you have that hook which
Mhm.
separates you from every other photographer that they're talking to. Because I get that a lot. Like, and I totally understand it when somebody says, "Oh, we went with someone else," and I always ask, "Oh, why did you hire someone else?" Because I want to know why they
Mhm.
hired somebody else. And they'll say, "We just had more of a connection with that person," and I'm like, "Okay." That's fine. Like that's totally
Right.
legit reason,
Right.
but like it helps me understand what I'm doing or whatever. But also lets me know that maybe they weren't like totally lined up with me. So
Yeah, right. It immediately eliminates the people that are not aligned with you too. That's a good point too, Casey. Yeah, absolutely.
yeah, because we're always worried about like these sort of like I don't know, price shopper people or whatever, and you kind of overcome that price shopping by appealing to people on that emotional level or whatever it is that problem that they want solved. S-
Yeah.
So
Yes.
how
Yeah.
do we think about like there's a lot of talk about like ideal client persona or profile or whatever these sorts of things that people can to better understand who their ideal clients is. How does a photographer get started in filling out something like that? Or what is one?
Yeah. Well, this is my jam. This is like my bread and butter. So I was introduced to the idea of a client avatar probably about 2 years ago, and I had a photographer friend of mine tell me that kind of like what you were saying at the beginning, venue related, ideal client stuff, or budget related, or whatever wasn't cutting it, and that I needed to visualize a person. Like I needed to actually create a person in my mind that I thought of every time I hosted or thought about, doing a wedding or whatever. And so I created a client avatar, and like, y'all, this is specific. Like, get specific with it. Like, my client avatar, her name's Heather. She is like 35. She is a single mom. She found the love of her life, and the only things that are important to her in life is being present, the really deep connections, and she wants to go elope in the mountains with her new husband and with her son. And my story is integrated into her because it's not even about like the identifying facts, but it's more about who she is, like what is important to her. And so then when I shoot Heather's wedding, I know to get the little moment of her and her son. And now I know her story. She left an abusive relationship. So all those tiny capturing, the tiny moments that I'm capturing of her and her husband, like doing little things, right? Like you have that filter now. And so now my empathy is open to my ideal client who is like Heather. And so when I walk into a wedding, I had this last weekend where it was actually a very similar situation to Heather, like almost identical. And it was my favorite wedding I think I've ever shot, Casey, like favorite wedding, because I've been preparing for Heather, right? I've been preparing this whole slow season for her. So yeah, I mean, it's just so building up. Yeah, it's beautiful. And like, we're sitting in the bridal suite before she walks down the aisle, and she's tearing up talking about her story. And it's a story that I can relate to. It's a story that I see in Heather. And we're crying before she walks down the aisle in gratitude of like how beautiful this moment is. And I'm like, I would have never had that 2 years ago with my clients, right? Like we would have been rushing and hurrying to try to get out the door, to get lined up. It wasn't important to her. What was important was having that moment of like preservation of gratitude and saying, we are here and I did it. And here I am marrying the love of my life. Like that's beautiful.
Yeah.
And I get to be a part of that moment.
It's amazing. And it's like, I totally like my ideal client is Lucy, and Lucy is in her, early 30s. And, like there's like, she values very much like those emotional connections, both with the husband and the to be, and, these, and family and close friends, because, she's lost people in her life, and, like that emotional connection things. So it's like, you're digging deep into these, like, this matters because, these memories are going to matter. And it's like, that's how I sort of like frame everything, because those are things that matter to me. We have those. And so when I had a similar experience where I booked a bride, and, she came to me and was like, I just have to say, like, this spoke to me so much. Like this, like there was a blog post that I had left out, and she was like, we shared our stories with one another in our discovery call, our talk with one another. And she was sharing the story about having, lost a parent. And, I was just like, oh man. And like, we were just like, these things that you wouldn't necessarily think to have conversations about, like, and when you're just sort of like only interested in the budget and the venue and the whatever, like you're not getting those sort of deep emotional connections with people. And like she booked me for the wedding on the phone call, like, like on the discovery call. It was just like, yeah, this is just right. This is the way it's supposed to be. And that's the sort of connection that you make with people when you start thinking about your ideal client in that way.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, this is, oh my gosh. I'm just like, the more we're talking about this, the more jazz I'm getting. This is so good.
I don't think that people understand, like when we say like we both like tell the names of our ideal client or whatever, like, don't understand, like we're so specific, like why you need to be so specific. Like there's sort of a, there are these, why is there such a need to be so specific about who your ideal client is?
Yeah, I think like for me, I think there's power in speaking what you feel, right? Like there's power in identifying. And so the more that you speak about your ideal client, the more that you identify them, the more honed in you're going to be with your vision and who like you're connecting with. Like you're speaking it into the universe. You're speaking it out loud. but not just that, but then now you're comfortable talking about it, period. And so, like you said, like you talking about it on social media, I'm just going to use that as an example again. Like, I feel comfortable with every single part of Heather, and actually Heather becomes more and more developed every day. And because of that, and because I'm so familiar with her, now I talk about things that are important to Heather and to me very freely. And so people who are like Heather are connecting with it, because you had said something earlier about like the problem solving. Like, I think, okay, what's a problem I can solve for Heather? Like, is it, she may have a concern of finding a photographer that is going to go with the flow and not stressed about her kid possibly having a meltdown because he's emotionally charged, right? Or like whatever. So when I talk about like XYZ doesn't matter. What matters is like having present moments and talking, and I post about my kids, I post about being patient. I post about just enjoying present life a lot. And so the more that I know what Heather may be concerned about, the more I'm able to solve that problem before she even thinks about it,
Right. Yeah, there may be problems that she has. Yeah, she might have problems that she doesn't even know that she has. Like she hasn't thought about.
Exactly.
Like that's one of those things, like, the more you think about and get specific about those sort of things for your ideal client, there are things that they may not have even realized. Oh, I knew I needed a photographer, but I didn't know what I was actually looking for. It's sort of that sort of people say, like, I'll know a beautiful picture when I see it. Like, I don't know, I don't know how to take I don't know what makes a great picture, but I know it when I see it. But it's that connection that they have to something, and there's something that they see in that photo. And a lot of it can be also, emotionally charged as well. Like they didn't know it consciously, and they don't dwell on it consciously, what the issue that they're trying to solve or they might have. And like you were saying, like having being a single mom and having a child and you're worried about a meltdown, that is something that is very specific, but it's so true to that person. It's so true to Heather that, that is something that she thinks about, but she doesn't necessarily maybe doesn't voice it, or it's not something she's going to check off on her list from the knot when she's looking for a photographer.
Right.
Like, this is what I got to look for. It's not those things. And so we get very specific. And that's another totally other thing is being specific about who your ideal client is where they are. Like the more that you think about them and where you can find them, if you're doing advertising or where you're spending your time on your marketing, where they're going to be and where they're actually looking for you, where that's where they're going to find you. They're not just you're not just throwing things out everywhere in the universe and hoping that, you want to focus your time because you want to work smarter, not harder. You want to find that person. And the more specific you can be with them, that's, and find out who they are, the more where they're going to be.
Right. Yeah. And even from a marketing perspective, when we're talking about statistics, you're really marketing to 1 to 3% of your Instagram following. That's if you can connect to 1 to 3%, that is a very successful day. So when we're talking so generally in all of our marketing, we're casting out a net to an ocean and not even knowing what we're trying to catch. We're just casting it out to everyone. And so what happens then, you get this whole mix of people and you're like, what is happening? Right? What is going on? Why am I getting this vast, polar opposite grouping of people? And so so I see Heather in that 1 to 3%. I'm not talking to everyone. I'm not talking to every single person who's following me. And I'm not talking to every single person who wants a wedding photographer. I'm not, and I'm very okay to let people go too. Not in a hostile way, but if we have a first initial conversation, I will be very honest with them and say, hey, I loved talking to you, but actually I think that I have someone that would just totally serve you in the best way possible. They're going to connect with you really, really well on XYZ. And I think that they're able to serve you a lot better than I think I would, as much as I would love to work with you.
Yeah.
Right? Just releasing it. And that is absolutely okay.
It's okay. I think that we, especially when we start out, we get so obsessed with we got to book as much as we possibly can and not realizing I was just having this conversation with another photographer about sales is great service.
Mm-hmm.
Like great service is sales. It's like that like serving people well. Like, and I had a conversation as well about like, referring someone to other people. And we're talking about like, would you ever tell people to stop referring you? And I said, no, because even if I can't help that person, I want to be the person who tells them, like where they can go to find the right connection for them. Cause I would do the same thing. And if I'm having that first meeting and I'm like, I don't want to, like, I don't think that we connect on the level that you will connect with X person that I know is a great photographer and will really like you two, are going to be perfect for one another. It just sends out this like goodwill into the universe, that I think is
Right.
invaluable. Like you will find, because then they will think about like, oh, well, who is going to connect with Casey or Brittany, and if I know that person, I'm going to refer you so much more to like the person that you're going to connect with. You end up finding those ideal clients from people who weren't necessarily your ideal client. They're going to send your ideal client to you because they're like, hey, this person took the time to know that I was not the right fit, or that we weren't the right fit together. But now I know who the right fit for them is, and I'm going to send that person as soon as I see them, and be effusively like, hey, you definitely got to hire Brittany, or you got to hire Casey, because they're the person who's really going to connect with you. That's what you need. Yeah, I think that it's also like what you were saying about like you're only really trying to connect with like 1 to 3%. As another good friend of mine who was like the first person who talked to me really about marketing, and when it came to my photography business, he was saying like, you don't like, there's this sort of misnomer that you need to get all you need to get is 3% of the 100%. Like you're just sort of like, you cast this net out there, and all you need to get is 3%. That's all that it takes to like run your business. And he was like, no, you need to get 100% of that 3%. That's
Right.
what you only need to think about that 3%. You don't need to think about the whole ocean. You need to think about that one spot. And like it's like you brought up the fishing analogy. It was like, it's as opposed to like taking your boat out into the deep ocean and just like casting nets all over the place, like as opposed to like sitting in the lagoon and just like picking up the fish in a net, like that you see like they're coming to the one spot, and you're just like, they're gonna come here, it's gonna be a lot easier. This is exactly where I need to focus my attention.
Yes, I love the 100% of the 3%. That is beautiful. Yeah, and you're not ultimately, when you're not doing this practice, you're doing a disservice to yourself. Like, the fear is that you're not going to book anything, and actually you book way more. You book way more because you are investing 100% into that. Like, I love that. That's so good, because it's true. And if I could go back to my younger self, so if anyone's listening and you're a brand new photographer, absolutely, you need to do free work. You need to get in, you need to watch people, you need to shadow. But don't believe the lie that you just need to take everything just to build up your portfolio, because I promise you, it actually will confuse you, and it will confuse your following. If you from the get-go just identify who you're aligned with and start speaking in that voice, you are going to have 10 times better of a business from the start than learning this slowly, right? I wish I would have done that. I wish I would have, So it's important. Do you feel like that? Like, do you feel like if you would have implemented that at the beginning?
Oh, yeah. Yes. I feel like if I had done that from the beginning, things would have been much easier. I also think that it would have been much easier if I had been open to the fact that it can change over time. That who I'm trying to reach might change. Like, as I grow and I become a different person and become a different in my art, like I might be appealing to somebody else. I am a different person. I serve people in a different way. Like that this can change. It is fluid, and that's why it's like it's something that you kind of keep coming back to. And I would recommend people write it all down. Personally, I think that writing it down helps you. As long as it just doesn't live in your head, because then you can like sit down and look at it and go like, yes, this is who this person is. Oh, you know what? I'm going to change that. Like, it's not just like this sort of amorphous thing that just sort of like lives in your imagination. You make them a real person by writing it down. I feel like that's me personally. but I don't want these young photographers out there, because we talk about like, oh, you need to be specific and you need to do also, it sounds like a lot of work at times. But so where do people start? Where is the starting point for creating this ideal client avatar persona profile?
So I actually have a kit. So if you go to my website and inquire with me, I actually have a downloadable kit. I'm building a store right now, so I don't have it accessible, but you can download a kit that helps you build. And it literally is like almost like if you went to a doctor's office and were filling out a biographical kind of questionnaire or all of your history. So it makes you sit down and think about Heather or whoever your ideal client is. So I think like you have to have that space to just like sit down and actually say aloud, okay, what's important to this person? Like, why do I connect? And another starting point too is think about an event that you have worked on or a person that you have worked with that just brought you life, that made you feel alive, and think about why. Why was that person so impactful to your business? Why did you connect to that wedding? Why did why do you want more clients like them? What about them are you desiring in your next client? And it's a lot of people are so like, I don't even know where I would start. And I'm like, if you've worked with any people, then you have a starting point. If you've worked with a single person, then you have a starting point, because you can feel in your spirit if you're aligned with them or if you're not.
Totally.
Instantly.
Sorry. I think that, past clients are such a great resource for this as well. Like, because when I did finally start doing this, I started to look back and like, this is how I sort of created the fact that, or came up with and figured out that, I was appealing to people who felt self-conscious or camera shy or whatever. Like even people who were not who you would think, like looking at the photos, like they seemed very gregarious, outgoing, party people, whatever. But deep down, they did feel self-conscious about themselves and just like had that connection with me of like that I was going to make them feel comfortable and that they could do whatever they wanted and wouldn't feel judged or whatever. Like that's a big part of, what our connection was. But it was going back and asking those people, like questions as well. And like thinking about like exactly what you said, why was this such a great experience with them? Why did things go so well? Why did we have such a great connection? And then going back and, asking them questions about like, what was it that you and I connected on? Like, what do you like? Because I know what I thought it was, but I want to know like what your thoughts are on, our experience together. And like, I got some of those answers back and I was just like blown away. I'm like things that I hadn't really consciously thought about. And then I sort of realized like, oh yeah, that is like, these are some through lines that amongst people who I wouldn't have necessarily thought were the same type of client, but actually on one level were. They all had the same through line of like feeling like needing to feel comfortable.
Yeah,
like, that was so
right.
important.
You were answering the question.
Yeah.
You were answering the question and the concern without even knowing you were.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like thinking that they were all disassociated, but they weren't.
It's funny too, because I've had weddings. I mean, this past weekend literally was a great example where I had no idea what I was getting into. They booked me like 2 months ago and pretty much like emailed me ready to book because they were getting married quickly. And I went into it, to be completely frank and honest, like this is just a wedding that someone booked me last minute. And like I said previously, it was my favorite wedding I've ever shot. It was the most aligned that I have ever felt with a client. And I didn't even know I was aligning with them. Like all of our conversation was so like, she's a busy mom. Like we're so quick, like we never like went into deep conversation. But when we got there, that foundation was already laid because I didn't even know she had been following me for a while.
Yep.
That foundation was already laid. And so then when we were sitting in her bridal suite crying together and having a beautiful moment, that was an hour into meeting her. An hour, right? Like it just blows my mind like that. I don't even know that I'm aligning with people, so crazy.
Yeah, it's sort of like those things, like people sort of stalking you. I had a couple who contacted me about a wedding in California, And like, I was like, oh, okay. Like, it's kind of odd. Like, you live in California. I'm on the East Coast. Like, yeah, sure. I've done weddings like in other places. Like, I do, whenever people call, wherever you want me to go, I go there. But it just kind of struck me. And she was like, started like laying out all of these things that she had read in my like Instagram and other posts going back like 9 months, like to before she was actually engaged. Like she had been like researching and she was just like hashtags and whatever. And like I had occasionally come up on my stuff and was just like was connecting with things that I was talking about. But she had been like, it had been like 9 months of like following me. And it's the same thing. It was just like, it was crazy. I was just like, oh, wow. Like we've had this connection for a while that I didn't even realize. But that's, I think, important for photographers to like, people on the other side are connecting with you. And it's hard because we get sort of like sucked into this sort of realm of thinking that it's all about likes and comments and shares and whatever. And the people who are connecting with you aren't necessarily always going to be engaging with you on social media. They could be lurking in the background for a long time before they actually reach out and talk to you.
So, and Casey, this is why I tell people, like, your follower count, I could give two craps. Like, I can't give two craps about my follower count. Yeah. I don't care. I literally do not care because at this point I'm still reaching people. So I have people who want to coach all the time and they want to build their following. And I'm like, you're looking at it wrong. Any kind of like Instagram marketing that you're going to buy and invest in that's like going to guarantee you following, followers do not pay your bills.
No.
Followers do not align with you all the time. You could have any kind of following and it would not matter. So it doesn't matter. So I'm going to, again, anyone listening to this that's new in the industry, y'all, do not believe the lie that it matters. Yes, it's great to get that 10K so you can swipe up. Beyond that, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, yeah, I completely agree. And I've always been of that mindset where it's like, it's the quality versus the quantity. It's the quality of the connection versus the number of people. And that quality of connection breeds more business. It breeds better. I don't know. Your business is going to thrive more if you're more concerned about making higher quality connections as opposed to I got to get as many followers as possible. Because I see I look at the percentages of things sometimes oh, what's the average? Just to play the game of average percentage of likes, and I sit there and going, oh man, these people had 1,000 likes on that, and I'm like, oh, well, actually they've got 2 million followers. 1,000 likes really isn't that many. And then I go back and look and go oh yeah, I guess my percentage is way, way higher than that. Just even on that basis is going oh, funny.
Right.
But and there's a whole other discussion to be had on percentage of actual photos on Instagram that get a like is 2%. Mm-hmm. Literally, there's there's so many photos and things out there. It's just make your concern about the engagement as opposed to just getting numbers.
Right, because there are people I have 3,500 followers on Instagram. I've had my Instagram for 4 years, 5 years. I mean, a long time, and it's slowly growing. And honestly, I don't care, because I love my people, and I've lost a lot of followers, a lot of followers. And I used to have this mindset where I'm like, if I had all the followers still that I had lost, then I would have X amount of followers, and that would have been so much more awesome than where I'm at now. And now I'm like, no, those people are being immediately weeded out as I'm talking. I'm aligning with the people. So I see that 3,500 as gold. Those are my golden people. And so I'd rather have 3,500 than all the followers that I lost. You know what I mean? I would much rather have that. So you have to look at it like that. You're aligning with people and it's kind of like the natural selection. Basically you're just able to let go of things.
Right. And not be concerned about getting into the numbers game, because then you just get concerned about numbers and not actually serving your clients or the people whoever your audience is. You start to get so concerned with just I need the numbers. And not actually thinking about what is actually paying your bills if you're concerned about your business. Like, just having, 8,000 or 10,000 or 20,000 followers isn't necessarily going to mean you're booking more jobs. That's not like, if you have like 500 and you're working all the time and you're happy with like, you're continuing to grow or whatever, but like your numbers aren't going crazy, I think you're in a good place.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. I completely agree with you.
I feel like that's for a whole other episode. We could do a whole episode.
I know. Let's do it. Let's do a part 2.
Yeah.
On Instagram. Oh, I could talk about that all day. Yeah, it's a whole other can of worms, but it's definitely important. But yeah, let's do a part 2, Casey. There we go.
We'll get it on the books.
Hey, Doc, thanks for seeing me.
No problem. I'm glad we got that whole other thing cleared up.
Yeah, I have to say, you scared me pretty bad when you told me I only had 6 months to live.
And you would have. In the Wild Wild West. But luckily, we have creams for that these days.
I appreciate it.
But I didn't ask you to come in to discuss life-saving salves and ointments.
What is it, Doc?
It's your WordPress website. It's old and outdated, and it needs a fresh new look.
I know, Doc. But I just don't have the money to pay a designer for a custom website.
You don't need to pay for a custom design when you use Flothemes.
Flothemes?
Yes, Flothemes. They have a wide variety of WordPress themes for the modern creative. Not just photographers, but for videographers, florists, wedding planners, and much more.
But are they customizable to suit my needs?
Yes, every theme is totally customizable. Flothemes has even launched a new line of Flex themes, which allows you to customize your website further than ever before while maintaining a cohesive, professional-looking theme.
Where can I get one, Doc?
Go to nerdyphotographer.com/recommends/Flothemes to learn more and see what they have to offer.
Thanks, Doc. I really appreciate it.
Good. But now we're going to need to talk about what's wrong with your uvula.
My uvula? What is it?
It's a small teardrop-shaped piece of soft tissue that hangs down in the back of your throat, but that's not important right now.
Hey. And now for my favorite part of the show. What's that say? Useless information. This is always death.
Brittany, did you know? Here's a tip for surviving a shark attack. Sharks
I'm ready.
see contrast very well. So wearing bright colors is not a great idea because they can see bright colors. Also, avoid shiny jewelry in the water as a shark may mistake it for fish scales.
Okay, here's a follow-up question. Is it true, do you know that if you punch like a shark's nose, that's like a good way to get them away from you?
It stuns them. Yeah.
Okay.
It's only they have like sort of a. I actually watched an episode of I don't know if it was Mythbusters or something else. Where they actually got into that. Like they have sharks do have like a lot of sensitivity in their nose for like smell and whatever. Also like sort of electrochemical sensations, whatever. And when you punch them and you have to hit them right in the nose, like it doesn't actually. They were showing I think it was a pretty big shark. Somebody had was getting up out of the water and they would tap it on the nose and it would just like flop over. And like they would get it up out of the water with like meat or whatever. Like it would just over the surface and it would come up to try to bite and they would just like tap it right on the nose and it would just kind of go, and like it would just like fall over without actually biting the bait that they had put up. So it's really,
okay. Well,
now you
this
have
is a
two.
great useless fact because I'm going to the beach this weekend.
Oh yeah. Oh, now not so useless. Hopefully useless. Hopefully useless. But in the event that it does become useful, you can be glad you knew that.
Now I know. I'll be like, thank you, Casey, for keeping me safe. Didn't even know. No, that was perfect. I love this. Thank you so much for having me. This is just
thank you for coming
amazing.
on. absolutely a pleasure to have you on. Come back, please. I'd
Yes,
love to have
absolutely. Absolutely. Well, thank you so much.
Well, you better start listening, 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 better start listening.
Welcome back. Thank you to Brittany Sidwell for being our guest on this episode of the podcast. You can find Brittany online at BrittanySidwellPhotography.com or on Instagram at bsidwellphoto. You may also find those links in the episode notes. Rula, please take over while I prep the machine.
You can find the Nerdy Photographer on Instagram, Twitter, Reddit, and TikTok at The Nerdy Photo. If you want to hear more episodes like this, please subscribe, leave a review, then tell your friends about the show. Sharing is caring, so share your feelings and this podcast early and often.
Thank you for that, Rula. Unfortunately, it looks like there are too many uncertainties in each of our ideal scenarios to effectively bring the nerdy photographer back. But perhaps uncertainty is where the answer lies. Until next time, listeners, stay safe and stay nerdy.
Who's that coming back to town? You better start listening. Who's your heart been beating about? You better listen.
I'm Agent Scott.
And I'm Cam, the provocateur.
And together we are the SpyHards podcast. Every Tuesday we decode the best and the worst of spy cinema to decipher if they make the knock list.
That's right, the knock list is the need-to-see official classics of the spy genre. The best of the best, so to speak. Nobody does it better. From Bourne to Bond and Powers to Palmer, you can bet we will cover it.
So subscribe now and revel in the audio equivalent of a smooth martini. Just search for SpyHards, that's SpyHards on all major podcast apps. And let's just hope you find us before we find you.